Hey guys, it's Ellie. Welcome back to Bite-Sized Book of Mormon. I'm glad to have you with me. So if you've never been here before, this is just a podcast where I read through one chapter of the Book of Mormon, and I provide a little bit of insight, a little bit of context, a little bit of good times, so stick around. So if you remember last episode, we read Mosiah chapter 7, which is kind of the first fully kind of narrative chapter in the Book of Mormon, because everything else has been mostly gospel preaching based, including King Benjamin's address that we just finished. So this is the beginning of like the narrative of the Book of Mormon. Like we've had some narrative before, but it was mostly summing up of history as opposed to like a story with characters. And so now that was where that started. So we continue that with this chapter. So if you haven't listened to that one, go back and do that because it's good. And then come and listen to this one. So I think without further ado, we read Mosiah chapter 8. And it came to pass that after King Limhi had made an end of speaking to his people, for he spake many things unto them, and only a few of them have I written in this book, he told his people all the things concerning their brethren, who were in the land of Zarahemla. And he caused that Ammon should stand up before the multitude, and rehearse unto them all that had happened unto their brethren, from the time that Zeniff went up out of the land, even until the time that he himself came up out of the land. And he also rehearsed unto them the last words which King Benjamin had taught them, and explained them to the people of King Limhi, so that they might understand all the words which he spake. So once again, we see the echoing importance of King Benjamin's address, even though he's literally dead now. Once King Limhi is done talking to his people, Ammon comes up. So like, he only had so much time, I'm sure, to speak to the whole city. And he used that to give a little bit of context of like, okay, this is how the city's doing, and then he was like, by the way, our late king just made this amazing address, and I need you to understand what's in it. Ammon isn't even like a prophet, but he's still relaying King Benjamin's message to these people because he finds it that important, which is pretty cool. And it came to pass that after he had done all this, that King Limhi dismissed the multitude, and caused that they should return every one to his own house. And it came to pass that he caused that the plates which contained the record of his people from the time that they left the land of Zarahemla should be brought before Ammon, that he might read them. Now as soon as Ammon had read the record, the king inquired of him to know if he could interpret languages, and Ammon told him that he could not. And the king said unto him, Being grieved for the afflictions of my people, I caused that 43 of my people should take a journey into the wilderness, that thereby they might find the land of Zarahemla, that we might appeal unto our brethren to deliver us out of bondage. And they were lost in the wilderness for the space of many days, yet they were diligent, and found not the land of Zarahemla, but returned to this land, having travelled in a land among many waters, having discovered a land which was covered with bones of men and of beasts, and was also covered with ruins of buildings of every kind, having discovered a land which had been peopled with a people who were as numerous as the hosts of Israel. This land that is filled with the bones of men and ruins of buildings is most likely where the Jaredites lived. And I've mentioned the Jaredites in the past, I think in Ammon in the beginning of Mosiah, but they're basically people that came from the Tower of Babel. They came to the Americas and had a whole civilization that grew and died before the Nephites even basically got there. It's like the final Jaredite living from their massive war that kind of took out the whole civilization was still alive and came and found shelter with the Zarahemlites before he died. And so the land that these people found was most likely the land of the Jaredites. And once again, as I mentioned before, things like this are a reminder that the Book of Mormon is merely a peek into a whole world, and that it all has shared context, shared history, shared heritage, shared culture in some cases. And it's so fun to see how many different things kind of intersect. The people came from the Tower of Babel, and people came from Jerusalem in Lehi's time, and also like people broke off into Zarahemla, and the Jaredites raised up the civilization and died, and the Coriantumr came from the Jaredites and met the people in Zarahemla and connected with them and died there, and the people from Zarahemla also found where the Jaredites lived, and like there's all these interactions that bring the world alive. And that's one of the things that I really do love about the Book of Mormon, is that it's so interconnected. There's so many allusions and references to other events and other people, some that we do hear more about and some that we don't, and it's so fascinating. I really love it. And for a testimony that the things that they had said are true, they have brought 24 plates, which are filled with engravings, and they are of pure gold. And behold also, they have brought breastplates, which are large, and they are of brass and of copper, and are perfectly sound. And again, they have brought swords, the hilts thereof have perished, and the blades thereof were cankered with rust, and there is no one in the land that is able to interpret the language or the engravings that are on the plates. Therefore I said unto thee, Canst thou translate? And I say unto thee again, knowest thou of any one that can translate? For I am desirous that these records should be translated into our own language. For perhaps they will give us a knowledge of a remnant of the people who have been destroyed, from whence these records came, or perhaps they will give us a knowledge of this very people who have been destroyed. And I am desirous to know the cause of their destruction. So I think King Limhi wanting so desperately to be able to understand the Book of Ether, which is what the Jaredites' 24 plates became in the Book of Mormon, I think that his desire, his curiosity, is twofold. I think it's partially like, whoa, these people lived not that far away from us, and yet they were entirely destroyed. I want to know why they were destroyed, and if it is gonna, like, be a danger to my people, or maybe we can learn about, like, how they did something similar to the people of Limhi did, and they, like, you know, killed a prophet or something. And secondly, I personally think Limhi was just so curious. You hear about a land full of bones and ruins, and you don't want to hear about it? Like, that sounds like such a cool story. Even now, we hear stories of, like, uncovering new ancient civilizations and new ancient settlements, and we're slowly trying to piece together archaeologically the stories of these places. And it's just so fascinating. I think there's just something innately human about wanting to know the stories of things that are past. So again, I think that Limhi not only wants to know about what's in the plates because they might educate him on why they fell and kind of what not to do, so he can take that to his people and teach them a little bit. But also, it's just cool, man. If I found plates of brass that are engraven with a language that I cannot understand from a civilization that fell perhaps somewhat recently, I would want to do everything in my power to understand that, because wow, that would be so, so cool. Now Ammon said unto him, I can assuredly tell thee, O king, of a man that can translate the records, for he has wherewith that he can look, and translate all records that are of ancient date, and it is a gift from God, and the things are called interpreters, and no man can look in them except he be commanded, lest he should look for that which he ought not, and he should perish. And whosoever is commanded to look in them, the same is called seer. And behold, the king of the people who are in the land of Zarahemla is the man that is commanded to do these things, and who has this high gift from God. And the king said that a seer is greater than a prophet. And Ammon said that a seer is a revelator and a prophet also, and a gift which is greater can no man have, except he should possess the power of God, which no man can. Yet a man may have great power given him from God. But a seer can know of things which are past, and also of things which are to come, and by them shall all things be revealed, or rather shall secret things be made manifest, and hidden things shall come to light, and things which are not known shall be made known by them, and also things shall be known by them which otherwise could not be known. Thus God provideth a means that man, through faith, might work mighty miracles, therefore he becometh a great benefit to his fellow beings. So I think it's mostly these verses that contribute to the reason that we call our first presidency in 12 prophets, seers, and revelators, because those are the three titles that these verses kind of link together. And seer, according to these verses, is the greatest of them all, because they have power from God through faith. And it says that specifically it's through faith, which I think is important, that they can know things that are otherwise hidden or that could not be known otherwise. And it is so cool to hear about how important prophets are. And the fact that King Mosiah is a prophet and he has these seer powers from God. And also, I'm like 98% sure that the interpreters that they're referring to in these past few verses is the Urim and Thummim that Joseph Smith used that was buried with the plates that he found. You know how, like, these Book of Mormon plates were, like, handed down from generation to generation, and, like, each person that got it wrote in it a little bit? I think that the Urim and Thummim was kind of part of that passing down thing. Same with the Sword of Laban, that's why Joseph Smith also inherited that. So anyways, it's kind of cool to see that shared thread as well. Like, a couple times throughout the Book of Mormon, you hear reference to the Urim and Thummim, and it's not mentioned every time, but, like, every once in a while you hear about it, and you're like, yeah, that's right, Joseph Smith did get that, didn't he? So it's cool to see, like, not only do we have modern records of the Urim and Thummim existing and someone using it to translate, but we have ancient records of someone having the Urim and Thummim and using it to translate, especially in a divine way. And that's definitely different from, like, secular translation. Anyways, it's just so cool to see how the Urim and Thummim has this long, thousands-year history, you know, before Joseph Smith got his hands on them. So anyways, super neat. And now, when Ammon had made an end of speaking these words, the king rejoiced exceedingly, and gave thanks to God, saying, Doubtless a great mystery is contained within these plates, and these interpreters were doubtless prepared for the purpose of unfolding all such mysteries to the children of men. "Oh, how marvelous are the works of the Lord, and how long doth he suffer with his people, yea, how blind and impenetrable are the understandings of the children of men, for they will not seek wisdom, neither do they desire that she should rule over them. Yea, they are as a wild flock, which fleeth from the shepherd, and scattereth, and are driven, and are devoured by the beasts of the forest." So I really love seeing how excited Limhi is once Ammon is like, well, I can't translate those records, but I know a guy. I know a guy who can. I just love to see how Limhi immediately just goes, oh my goodness, this is amazing. God is the best. Praise God. Like, oh my gosh, we don't understand anything, but God knows everything. You know, like he just immediately goes into like praising God, which is super fun because it really shows how excited he is and how passionate he is about reading these records and learning from them. Also, note in verse 20, it says, "For they will not seek wisdom, neither do they desire that she should rule over them." And the footnote says that it's a she because wisdom in Hebrew and Greek is a feminine noun. So that's kind of an interesting little linguistic-y thing. That she there is because of the grammatical gender of that noun in other languages. So kind of cool. And also like a little bit of brief internal evidence that like this was translated from like a form of Hebrew because, you know, it has that sort of grammatical gender, because English hasn't had a grammatical gender for hundreds of years by the time that Joseph Smith is writing this, and he probably knew nothing about Hebrew and had no idea even what grammatical gender was because he's a freaking New York farm boy. Why would he include this detail of saying that it's a she, that wisdom is a she? So anyways, those kinds of internal evidences are very fun. So whenever I stumble across one, I just love mentioning it. But the standout verse for this chapter is going to be verse 20, the second to last verse, and it says, "Oh, how marvelous are the works of the Lord, and how long doth he suffer with his people, yea, and how blind and impenetrable are the understandings of the children of men, for they will not seek wisdom, neither do they desire that she should rule over them." So obviously I already mentioned this little she detail and how cool it is, and you know how it comes from the grammar of Hebrew and how that language works. But I also love kind of the context of this verse. Not only do I love the content of this verse, the fact that Limhi is praising God and he's saying, wow, he suffers with his people so long and humans are so blind and their understandings are so impenetrable. And I love that content, obviously. It's amazing. I have it underlined in my copy. But I also love the context, how this outburst of just excitement and piety, I guess, comes after Ammon is like, yes, I know someone that can translate these records for you, because it shows how important these records are to Limhi. Like I mentioned before, he probably is so interested in them for two reasons, human curiosity being one, and two, he can learn from them to teach his people. In the last chapter, if you listen to it, you remember that Limhi was kind of reflecting on how they got to where they are. Like, they're currently enslaved by the Lamanites, and he's reflecting on why they're put into this affliction, and he is pretty sure that it's because their previous generation killed a prophet, and they're not listening to the prophets or the word of God, and so the Lord is punishing them a little bit by being enslaved by Lamanites. He's kind of reflecting on, well, this is how we got to where we are. It is because we killed this prophet Abinadi. And so I think that he's looking for a little bit more insight into, like, wow, this entire civilization was destroyed. Like, yeah, we are currently enslaved, but we're not destroyed. What did these people do to get destroyed? Like, what sins did they commit that we can avoid that got them into their situation? I think that's also kind of what he's thinking about, because he's the king, you know, like he's a steward over all these people and he has to teach them and lead them in the right way. You know, he's doing so partially by reflecting on the past and trying to learn from it, but also he's trying to reflect on someone else's past and learn from their experience and learn from their example, which is something that we can do when we're reading the Book of Mormon. And in fact, I don't know, there's a verse somewhere that says, we write this not because we want to show you how perfect we are, but because we want you to learn from our imperfection. And I could not tell you what that verse is or where it is from, but I know that there is a verse in the Book of Mormon somewhere that basically says, we want you to learn from our experiences and we want you to learn from our mistakes especially. And that's what we can do by reading the Book of Mormon. And it might be similar to what Limhi was looking for in the 24 plates from the Jaredite. So it's kind of cool that like we are connected to Limhi in that way, that we're using this ancient scripture or this ancient record in a similar way to learn for ourselves and to not make the same mistakes that people in the past have made. Pretty neat how that connects. Also, I think my mom likes this chapter because she's an archivist. She went to school to be an archivist, and so she has opinions about keeping records and having things accessible to everyone. I'm sure that she's very excited about this ancient record from the Jaredites becoming accessible to this whole new audience that can find use in it. So anyways, kind of a fun detail. But yeah, I think that's it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. I really do love having an audience around that I can talk at. Anyways, there are a few links down in the show notes that I want to go over. The first three are just different versions of the Book of Mormon, so if you want to read along for yourself and you don't have your own copy, go ahead, click those to let the Book of Mormon into your life. Yes. There's also a Let Me Know What You Learned link down there, so if you want to tell me what you learned or give me feedback, good or bad, about the podcast, what you like, what you don't like, send me a message there. I will see it. Also, there is a support the show link, so if you want to shoot me a few bucks, you can. That's available. And finally, we're on YouTube, so if you want to subscribe to the YouTube channel, listen to the podcast there, and potentially find extra content, we shall see, then subscribe there. So, anyways, I appreciate you listening, and yeah, I think that's all I have for you today. Talk to you later. Bye.